So welcome to today's Topics in Tech. It is October 27th, and our guest is Chris Mayfarth, who graduated from Bentley ages ago in 2007, 2008, with a bachelor's in computer information systems, and also a master's in information technology. He was a tutor in the CIS lab at Bentley, which is the previous incarnation of the room where Andre and Ryan are currently sitting. And since then has worked at Akamai and other places, and is now at Skillsoft. And the topic today is digital transformation and amazing things like that. Good to have you back.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I am happy to be here. Let's see, do you, perfect. I do have permission now to share my screen.
You have the power.
Cool. Let me know, can you guys see that? Perfect.
You're good.
Okay. So yeah, I am going to talk about digital transformation. Ooh, looks like we have one more. So I am going to talk about digital transformation. I didn't want to give Press Frydenberg too many topics that I was going to discuss. I didn't want to scare him away. So I may also spill into a few other related topics. But I think first and foremost, I'll give you guys a little bit of a background on me and what my career path has been like. And then, yep, I want to talk about digital transformation. It's a bit of a buzzword. I like to think of digital transformation as driving a lot of the innovation, a lot of the tech projects that are happening right now, right? It's how companies pull off those big bets, those transformations within the market. And then I'll talk a little bit about change management, and specifically, digital transformation efforts fail for many reasons, but change management is one of the ways that I think they fail the most frequently. And so I wanted to touch on change management and specifically what I see as like bridge roles within companies where business meets technology. And because ultimately that was actually the value that I think that one of the largest values that I got out of my Bentley education, right, was it took business, it took technology, it kind of mushed them together. And there are a lot of roles that are not 100% technology roles. They're not 100% business roles. You need to be able to live on both sides. You need to be able to interact with people from both sides. And those roles make good money, and they're critically important. And so I want to talk a little bit about change management, how you do that well, and what some of those bridge roles are. And we're kind of going from large, from highest level to smallest, most granular. So digital transformation, why some digital transformation fails and what it looks like kind of behind the curtain. And then if time allows, I've tossed in a management model. It's mostly used for like management consulting, management training programs. But it's something that I've used consistently throughout my career, both with my direct reports and with my managers. And I think that, at the very granular level, it's a great tool for how to be on the same page with your manager, with your boss, how to make sure you're talking the same language. Yeah, and that's kind of the most granular level of sometimes why digital transformation fails. Eventually it does come down to the individual, comes down to what individual teams are able to produce. So we're going from large to small. Actually, let me just pause there really quickly. Anyone have any questions about those topics? Are these things that you have covered in classes or that you've heard about, or is there an area, one of these that you'd want me to focus on more than others? I will take silence as, just carry on. But if anyone has any asks, now's the time.
Feel free to ask them questions too.
Okay, cool. So my background Mark mentioned, I was a CIS undergrad. I graduated in 07. I got my master's the following year in 08. Not quite not quite 12 months apart. There was a little issue with the statistics class I needed to retake. So I think they're only like 6 months apart or 4 months apart. But I hope that people don't look too closely at that part of my resume. I did work in the lab. I was a Java tutor for 4 years and helped rewrite a lot of the curriculum for how we tutored Java and the 100 level intro programming classes at the time. When I left Bentley, I joined Deloitte Consulting as a business technology analyst, and then was promoted to be a consultant. I was in the system integration group. The way Deloitte Consulting works on the technology side, they have groups for business consulting and human capital, HR issues. But in the deep technical consulting, they have a group that was focused on SAP. They had a group that was focused on Oracle, and then they had a group for absolutely everything else. And so I was in the absolutely everything else bucket. I spent 2 years at Deloitte, and then I transitioned to working at Akamai. Akamai, if you're not familiar, is a tech company in Cambridge. They make the internet work. You have probably used them today without realizing it. They make YouTube videos go fast. They make HBO videos go fast online. They accelerate websites, they accelerate games, and they do online security. So if you've watched and consumed any sort of media on, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, HBO, gone and looked at a website today, there's a really good chance, probably about 40% of anything that you did online, Akamai was helping power that behind the scenes. And so at Akamai, I started as a sales engineer, which is one of those bridge roles that I'll touch upon kind of in the second section. I worked at Akamai for just shy of 9 years. The majority of that was within our channel partner program. And that was a program where Akamai would partner with other companies to embed our technology, and then they would sell that solution, right? So you're marrying 2 different technology solutions together, creating something that has a unique value prop and value in the market, and then you're going and selling that new solution. And sometimes the partner sells it, sometimes you both sell it, sometimes just Akamai sells it. But that overall, that's how the program works. I was a sales engineer, so for a long time I was helping build those deals and those partnerships and end customer opportunities. And then that transitions into an enablement role. How do we train the partners and their sales teams how to find deals, identify deals, qualify deals? How do we build those partnerships? A lot of people are thinking about the business side of them, like putting numbers into Excel and making these waterfall charts that look really compelling. But at the end of the day, many of these partnerships at their core have a technology component. They are fusing 2 technology solutions together. And so if that's not going to work, if it's going to be a crappy end user experience, why bother, right? So part of that role was figuring out upstream, are these deals, are these opportunities that we even want to pursue? And then currently, I'm at Skillsoft. Skillsoft is the world leader in digital education, online learning for the enterprise. And I've held 2 roles there, both again within the partner program, but kind of 2 sides of the partner program. First was on that commercial side, similar to the role I had at Akamai, where we're looking at commercial partnerships where something is being created and sold. And more recently, I've been working on the product partnership side, which is all about our platform and its ecosystem, right? We need to connect to other platforms, other tools, other SaaS providers. And as a content company, an online learning company, we also want to take content from Harvard and bring that into our platform. We want to connect to other content sources for, for labs and for, for business training with these other providers, so that if our customers want to use, Harvard, Harvard mentor content, for instance, they can get that within our platform. They don't need to go elsewhere. They don't need to go and, give their dollars to someone else. They can stay with us and then just bring in that really important, content. It's all about, for the customer, making sure that our solution plays nice with their ecosystem from a technology standpoint and their ecosystem from a content and HR standpoint. So I'll pause there. That's kind of me up to this point. Any high-level questions about my career path? You can feel free to. You can also hold them to the end if that's easier. But I'm happy to answer now, especially if you have any questions about what my role is or what my skill set is before I go off talking about digital transformation.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So when you first joined the workforce in 2008, did you find your role kind of similar to what you experienced on college, or how did you transition from school to workforce? Is it like, did you have the necessary experience, or did you get like a job training from Deloitte? How did the transition go?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So for me personally, I had also been working part-time, while getting my master's and an undergrad at a little tech company in Burlington. So there was definitely elements of my role. I'm going to break it out a different way. I think that from a kind of a hard technology skills side, I learned most of what I needed to know, at Bentley or self-taught. But there's also a willingness from companies to teach that to you. I think the bigger jump for me was that the skill set to be successful, and especially at a consulting company like Deloitte, you need to understand the political nature of getting work done, right? It's not just the work that you do, it's also the perception of the work you do. And that those two things go hand in hand. And so you always need to be delivering work, and you also always need to be positioning and making sure that you have a good perception of that work that you're delivering. And you'll meet individuals who are very skewed on one end of that spectrum or another. You'll meet people, right, that do practically nothing and are all perception, right? They spend all of their time making sure people think that they are delivering great work, even though they're not delivering anything. And you'll meet people who work their butts off and are doing really long hours, but are not at all concerned about how the work they are doing is recognized and perceived. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges for me, was realizing that is a balance, and in different situations, you need to strike that balance in different ways. For me personally, I think my skill set, I didn't feel like there was a big gap in my skill set, but that's, my time at Bentley, I started, for instance, with like the tutoring that I mentioned, I rewrote a lot of the material and guides for how we tutor. that wasn't something I was asked to do. That was something that I kind of identified like, whoa, wow, like this isn't necessarily working very well. How can we re-engineer this to be more successful? And that type of, I think, behavior is the same skill set that I leveraged at Deloitte and at Akamai and now at Skillsoft. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem at all. Any other questions on career background?
Yeah, quick question. Was going into consulting at Deloitte a deliberate choice after graduate school, or did you kind of fall into it, or did a teacher push you in that direction? What was it like?
That is, I know, Deloitte was recruiting. I felt like I wanted to go into consulting. And to be honest, I forget if there was some sort of, compelling moment. I had been interacting with Deloitte representatives on campus since I think my junior year. Like they were doing case study interview trainings and preparations. And I just really liked the way they kind of held themselves. And I liked, they traveled all over the place and worked with different companies. Joke was on me. I actually only traveled for my entire Deloitte career. I think I traveled about a week and a half, and it was to Hartford, Connecticut. So it didn't play out the way I envisioned it, but I knew for a long time that I wanted to go into a consulting company. I think the main driver for me was I knew that I didn't want to be a programmer, but I wanted the proximity to technology. I considered myself a technologist, and this is actually a really great segue into digital transformation, because digital transformation is a buzzword, but it is what I found the most compelling. And at the time, Deloitte and other consulting companies was where I said, oh, this is where they're doing that. They are finding a problem and they're saying, how do we solve this using fill in the blank, right? Using SAP, using Oracle, using Salesforce, using just, Excel macros that they've built from scratch, but they're solving problems with technology. And I loved the idea, not necessarily of being the person to, implement each one of those solutions, right? And I'm trying to be very honest, like, even though I was a tutor for Java at Bentley, I didn't have the chops to be a full-time, developer, right? I had a very shallow but broad understanding of programming, and I was able to educate other people and teach other people the fundamentals. So for me, it was much more attractive to be involved in the team that helped come up with those solutions and figure out the best way to roll those solutions out. And that's how I would kind of maintain that balance of still being close and having that proximity to the technology. Great. Does that answer the question for you? Cool. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the first, we kind of, was a really good segue into digital transformation. I love this picture. I love this picture. I love this picture. I love this picture. I feel like every digital transformation picture is some sort of weird, stupid, like, picture of like a hand with lots of weird things all around it. It's like this abstract marketing image around what digital transformation is. But, this is the definition that I like the most. I ripped this from Salesforce.com. Right? Digital transformation is the process of using digital technologies, aka technology, to create new business processes, culture, or customer experiences. And that's that's the gist of it, right? Which is anytime something is new that's being created, if it's a process, culture, customer experience, a product, a solution, how are you leveraging technology to do that the right way? And a big part of digital transformation is that it doesn't follow the traditional roles and silos of sales, marketing, customer service. It's really supposed to be very customer centric. And so you learn about your customer and you have the customer driving your digital transformation choices rather than operating everything in a silo. But this is really just a fancy way, right, of saying you're taking something that is on paper and you're doing it in Excel. The example I gave with Deloitte of doing things in VBA macros in Excel, that's just automated Excel scripting. Mark, is VBA still a part of IT 101?
No.
Okay.
No, well, we do macros and
Okay.
So actually, yes, we do a little bit of macros. They don't write VBA other than don't recognize that it's there.
Okay, well, but you have familiarity with like the fact that you can record macros. VBAs are just fancy macros that that you're doing a little more scripting yourself. That example I had from Deloitte was real. I mean, this was a many tens of $million project combining replacing a health insurance coding software where they're doing millions of transactions a day. And I joined that project, and the testing on that was, we have a group of 10 people and they pick at random 10 claims and they do the math on a calculator and they check to make sure that the old system matches the new system. And that was the extent of their QA testing that they were doing for this, many tens of $million project. And in that situation, digital transformation meant Excel. It meant, let's get a giant data export in Excel. Let's compare them. Let's automate it. Let's figure out what they're doing manually and automate it. Look for things that should match. Look for things that match but shouldn't match, right? And so that's where digital transformation starts. Where it really ends is with CRM systems, HubSpot, Salesforce, Zendesk, these large platforms where you don't need to have someone manually running scripts in Excel, right? You can actually change behavior. You can change the way people conduct their jobs. You can change the culture. So this is the high-level pictogram version of digital transformation. When you think about kind of how to get there, digital transformation relies on two really important kind of prerequisites. And the first one is the digitization, right? Actually making sure you have access to that information and that data. And this may seem like this is kind of a deceiving step, because I think a lot of people, can kind of laugh it off like, oh yeah, well, you have a bunch of paper. Well, it's not just converting paper to digital, right? It's also organizing that information and making sure that you have the right fields, right? Like you could have a bunch of information about different sales opportunities, right? Something like in Salesforce, all the different deals that your sales team is working on and where they are in the pipeline. But if you don't actually, you could track the customer and how much it's worth and what product, but if you don't track what stage of the pipeline it's in, or you don't have a way of matching up the name of the customer to some sort of, external database about, customer size, right? You don't have any way of understanding, is that a $1 billion company or is that a $1 million company? You have no way of automating, right? You have things that have been digitized, but you don't have all of the information you need digitized, right? So that's really step 1 and 2. Every piece of data that you need to make those systematic, programmatic decisions, you need to get into the system. Second one is really that kind of using Excel version, right? It's the stopgap. It's like, oh, how can we automate some small things? How can we make a few things better? How do we take some initiative and help change these little pain points? And that's great, but it doesn't solve the kind of overarching complex problem. That's the final step. That's true digital transformation, right? Where you are leveraging not just one process that's been automated, you're leveraging all of the processes. And that's where you can start to say something like, this is something that we used to do this by hand. Then it goes to, we can automate this, but we still need to do it. That last step would be, oh, well, once this is completely automated, why don't we just let the customer do it? We don't need to do it at all. We can let the customer do it, right? And so that's the kind of big digital transformation idea that brings it all together. You get all the data first and foremost, then you start automating those individual processes. And then once everything is automated, then you can have that game-changing transformation. Why are we doing this in the first place? Let's just have the customers do it. Let's give them more control. Only possible, right? If you have 1, 2, 3, and 4 on this chart already in order. All right, I'll pause there. Questions on digital transformation? Is this stuff that you guys, am I just giving you a review of everything you've heard at Bentley so far? Okay, cool. Well, I think this is I'm trying to give you my candid approach, because I think that digital transformation is one of those super buzzwords right now. But this is all it means, right? It means taking the initiative, it means getting data into the system, it means automating, small things first, and then the big things. And there's it really should be demystified, because that's why you get all those marketing images, right, at the very beginning, that are just hands reaching into space and touching weird, abstract, augmented reality buttons. That shit doesn't mean anything. Use the language. Okay, so I'm not going to talk through each one of these. I stole this from, I shamelessly have stolen a bunch of these diagrams from doing targeted Google searches. The one thing I wanted to just focus on here is, we've talked about how business transformation is, it's based on the customer, right? There are different areas that you can really leverage business transformation. I liked this chart because I thought it broke down those different areas as well as the actual technologies really well, right? So you have vendor and partner ecosystem, how your business communicates with other businesses. Operations, right? How you are doing sales ops, like physical operations, for your business workplace, and how you are streamlining and transforming, your business for your employees, and then products and services. Most people think products and services first when they think business transformation. How does this change what we are selling? How does that impact our product? How does that impact how much money we can generate because we're going to think of the new cool thing? But it really is, right, like, you can come up with a new cool thing, but if you have a terrible team that's really slow, it's doing everything by hand, and you can't partner with anyone else, it doesn't matter how cool your product is, right? In this day and age, you need to have an ecosystem. You need to trust other companies and work with other companies to do the things that they're good at. You don't want to be an expert at everything, right? You need your operations to be strong. You need your internal employees to be able to collaborate together and work efficiently. And when all of that falls into place, then you also have to have that good idea, that good product you can bring to market and make a bunch of money. So business transformation, of course, spans that whole gambit. And it doesn't, no one is going in and saying, oh, let's tackle every single one of these things right away. Right, that isn't viable, that isn't realistic. But a good company is looking at these and saying, where should we focus? Where are we lacking? Where can we start building, a foundation so this year, so that we can, build on top of that next year? Any questions about this? Kind of how business transformation spans the whole, kind of cross-functionally across the whole company, or any of these specific technologies? Cool. So I think I joked earlier about digital transformation, being complex. You get a lot of infographics like this one that just say like, hey, you just need to acknowledge, knowing you have a problem is the first step to getting better. And you need, to start, and you need to invest, and you need to plan. It is, of course, far more complicated, because digital transformation is this umbrella concept, right? When you break it down, there's going to be tens, if not hundreds, of digital transformation efforts. Those are all going to be supported by different projects. Those are all going to be supported by, individual initiatives. Each one of those needs to function and needs to work. And you need to have a plan. And ultimately, that's what, a lot of, folks in tech are doing these days, right? Is they're rolling out some sort of digital transformation project as it intersects with their area of expertise. So it's far more complicated than a lot of these infographics make it seem. That being said, there is a common element across all digital transformation that I perceive as a huge stumbling block. And that is where we shift into talking about change management. And digital transformation at its core is about transformation. It's about changing the way you do business. And an essential part of that is how you change. And this is so critical for you to be successful. And it's somewhere where a lot of people fall flat, because even if you have it goes back to not just the work you do, it's the perception of the work you do. It's not just how good your technology solution is, it's whether or not people use it. I've personally rolled out changes into Salesforce, and at great extent took months to get these changes approved, rolled out to our Salesforce instance. Guess what? No one used them. No one. And so was that a failure of the technology solution? No, technology solution would have worked, but the technology solution didn't work because nobody used it. And so change management is really critical in this process. And there are multiple steps, but they all leverage, they all kind of rely on interacting with your employees, engaging them, educating them, and making sure that the changes that you're trying to roll out are, well, let's say here on this chart, embedded into the culture, right? You can't just go and ask someone to do something that's that's hard. People don't like to change, right? You need it to be accessible from within Slack, accessible within, within the workflow that they already have. Make sure that they see it coming. Make sure that they understand why. Why are we even doing this? How will it change my life? And this is an area where technology and business start to fuse together. So the thing I really wanted to hit on there is this concept that business and technology do fuse together. And to be successful in any job, any technical based job, you need to be able to do at least a little bit of the other side, right? If you consider yourself a technologist, you need to understand the business, the business side. If you're in business, you need to at least understand the fundamental building blocks of how the technology works. I'll pause there because I wanted to talk about some specific jobs, some specific roles, right, that I think especially Bentley grads are really well qualified for, because I think that a lot of the Bentley grads, right, have that duality. They can do, walk both sides of that equation. But before I get into that, any questions at a high level around change management?
Just a quick question. So, obviously, like you said, you're a few years removed from your graduation here at Bentley, but having been in the workforce for a while now, is there anything advice you can give us that we can do here in our 4 or 5 years that will get us, well trained in change management in that kind of sector of technology?
100%. Yes. yes. PowerPoint. That is my 100% dead serious answer. Learn how to use PowerPoint and learn how to use PowerPoint well. And to be clear, I'm not, don't take my PowerPoint today as necessarily an example of what a good PowerPoint looks like. I threw this together in just a few minutes, but being able to convey a complex idea in a single slide, not using a lot of words, using graphics, using some definitions, is critically important. And I have, at every stage of my career, I have pitched new ideas, I have explained existing ideas, I've gotten stakeholders on board by leveraging good PowerPoints. Because at the core, when there is a disagreement, when there is confusion, ultimately people need to be educated. And education does not come from, it's very hard, right? This is why professors lecture with material behind them. It's why sometimes when you code, you actually see the code. It's why for some people, seeing code isn't as important as understanding the philosophy behind why you code things certain ways and how things like object orientation work. So learn how to use PowerPoint, master that in school, and you will be a irreplaceable asset on whatever team you're on, because it is really, in my mind, it is the vehicle for ideas and for change and for education across the workplace. And there are so many bad PowerPoints. If you can master it and master it well, it'll serve you well.
Chris, are you familiar with the phrase storytelling with data?
Yes.
So that's an area that we're exploring at Bentley. In fact, we have a new course, CS 160, which is all about data-driven decision making and how to present data in ways that make sense visually. And it seems to me that as part of your emphasis on how to use PowerPoint or some other tool to present your message effectively, being able to understand data in a way that you can present that effectively is also up on the list.
Oh yeah, it goes hand in hand, definitely. there is, you know, the further up you go in kind of the corporate hierarchy, the more importance that data has. But it's weirdly inverse, where the higher up you go, the less data they want to see, but the more importance that small subset of data has, right? So it's about the narrative and the specific data points to back that up. Whereas the deeper you go in an organization, that's when you need that kind of L2, that level 2 amount of data, because you need to make it real, right? You need to implement change. You need to understand the cause and effect and how, you know, your net promoter score impacts revenue and how individual processes are functioning, you know, if it's you know, efficiently or not. So yeah, I definitely agree with that, Mark. It's a real critical part, you know, data and that narrative together. Yeah, if you can do that, you're really well positioned in the workplace today.
Thank you. Keep going. Thank you for sharing that. And
Oh, no problem. Wonder why. There we go. So this is my completely not scientific chart of different roles that span technology and business, right? And I think that this is at least how I think about it. So please, you know, as I said, not scientific. Who knows? Maybe not even accurate. But I think of a lot of roles as, you know, being close to the intersection of technology skills and business skills. And I have seen charts that look similar to this, or at least people speak about these roles as if they have a finite, you know, kind of amount of each, the business and the technology side. You know, sales, oh, you're all business. Developer, you're all technology. And I don't think that that's honestly true anymore. And I think most companies are becoming very savvy to the fact that a lot of these roles do exist on a spectrum, and that there may be a shift. Sales might be more business focused than, you know, if you're a developer. That doesn't seem like a stretch of the imagination. But you can have a more technology focused salesperson. You can have a more business savvy developer, right? Each of these roles can exist on a spectrum. And these are roles, at least for me, when I was a student, I had no idea that the vast majority of these roles existed. I knew that the very top and the very bottom, you could be a developer, you could be a salesperson. And in my mind, that was it. It's like, do you want to be sales or do you want to be a developer? And the fact of the matter is, you know, there are many, many roles that exist in between. And I would, you know, the biggest piece of advice I can give someone who would be interested in a CIS role or an MSIT is look into these roles that are bridge roles. Work on your skill set, work on developing the ability to bring business into technology and to up-level your technology to describe it to someone who isn't a technologist. Do you guys have familiarity with like these titles, solution architect, TPM, sales engineers? I see a few heads nodding. Would it be helpful for me to go through and talk about each one at least a little bit at a high level? Okay. Man, it is, wish I could be there in person. It is bizarre to see lots of heads nodding. You guys must have been putting up with this for a long time. Did you have remote classes? Have you been in person this year, but remote all of last year? Wow.
yeah,
I can't imagine. That's, hopefully you're now having good parties to make up for lost time. in safe COVID responsible numbers. So developer, I think pretty self-explanatory. Sales, pretty self-explanatory. Is that a fair assumption? Okay. So, and I will state my definition of these roles is based on my experience. Many of these titles and roles sometimes change. Solution architects, sometimes are called solution engineers. They're named different things, but in concept, these exist at every company, right? You might have someone who does both roles in a big company. There might be additional, roles. You might have sales engineer really being divided into two different roles. But in practice, the capabilities and the functions that these roles are providing will exist at every company. So a solution architect is someone who works as a go-between between the sales team and the developer and the product team. And they are the people who understand how that product functions and can figure out, when the customer asks for something custom, the customer asks for something to be changed. They ask for, ooh, I need this to fit in my world, in my ecosystem, with my, the platforms and products and the technology that I have in my company. The solution architect looks at the piece that needs to change and help scope, is this a big change or a little change? Is this something that's possible? And they very often can be the wizards who can think of, a more intricate solution to have a product solve a problem that the customer and the rest of the sales team didn't really think was possible. Right? Technical project manager. This one is actually relatively self-explanatory, but anytime you sell something, anytime you're working on rolling out any sort of enhancements to a product with a customer, that's a project that needs to be managed. That you need someone who understands the technology ecosystem of the customer and can help guide them through this deployment, right? Because anything you buy these days needs to be configured for your online ecosystem, right? You have SaaS, you have SaaS software in the cloud. Everyone's infrastructure looks a little bit different. That technical project manager knows the customer, knows what their ecosystem looks like, and helps guide them. They're the guide on that adventure. Sales engineer is really the counterpart of the salesperson, right? They're the person who helps describe the product and its technology function. Right? They're the people who explain how that product works. And the sales engineers and a salesperson are generally attached to the hip, right? They both are really doing the same role. The sales is representing that more business side. The sales engineer is talking more about the technology value. And that's a role that can be, really, really thrilling if you love technology. Sales engineers give demos, right? They need to know enough to be dangerous. They need to know enough to convince someone to buy that product, right? So, I think I was saying earlier, it comes down to education, right? So they need to know enough to educate that customer to move forward, and specifically the technology team at that end customer. Engagement managers are, very similar to technical project managers, but they sometimes will stay on for the life of a customer, right? Because in the world of SaaS and subscription-based products, you don't sell someone something and then forget about them. You sell them something, and then a year later, you need to renew them. You need to make sure that they're happy. Otherwise, they're going to wave goodbye, and that revenue that you're counting on is going to disappear. And so engagement managers very often, play that role, understanding of the products, understanding the customer, and they keep the pulse on how that customer is doing, how they're feeling. for the entire course of their contract, they're very often very focused on that renewal, making sure that that when we have to come and sign up that customer for a second year, they're just as eager to buy the second year as they were the first year. All right, what are your questions on these roles?
Let me ask you guys a question. Jackson and Robel and those who are in, and who else is over there? Andre and Ryan and C. Which of these roles do you think require knowledge of coding?
You said requires the knowledge of coding.
Yeah, which ones do you think requires at least some knowledge of coding?
Developer.
For sure.
I believe the solution architect and TPM also require somehow programming foundations.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something really important there, which is foundations. And I think that it's a true scale. Developer certainly needs to know how to code and code. Solution architect needs to understand how that developer is coding. You're exactly right about the TPM. They need to understand the fundamentals. They need to understand, is this an easy problem or is this a hard problem? Is this a 50-hour problem or is this a 15-minute problem? Yeah, it's a great answer, and you are absolutely correct that it's a spectrum. And even beyond that, sales engineers, engagement managers, sales, I'll tell you, I know some of the most successful salespeople that I have ever met also have a good fundamental knowledge of what coding is. They're not fooling anyone. They're not going to be developers, but they understand those foundational building blocks, right? Because if you understand, for instance, coding, that is that's a building block for understanding how technology products function, and how to sell them and how to talk about their value that they offer to the building, the business. At the same rate, right? I've certainly met some TPMs who they don't know a lick of coding. They have a really good ability to estimate time and manage teams and talk to the developers and talk to the solution architects and know when they're being lied to and know when they're not being lied to, right? They know who to trust, they know when to trust them. So it's I think it's a really good question, and you had a really good answer. Any other questions about these roles? I will say that coming out of school, I don't think any of these jobs are off the table, for someone directly coming out of school. I think that it's probably easiest to enter in either at the top of the bottom, sales or developer, or in the very center, in like sales engineer, TPM. Sales engineers, a lot of startup companies, they're willing to invest in folks to be sales engineers. As long as you can talk about this product and you can describe it to someone, they're willing to build and invest. A sales engineer at a larger, more prominent tech company, they're probably going to want to see a little bit more history, either as a developer or even on the sales side, before you switch into that role. But each one of these roles, if you find the right size company, brand new grads can easily find these types of roles. I know people are hiring all over Boston for them right now. Okay, so that's my soapbox on bridge roles, and why I think they're great, and why I think more people from Bentley should, and specifically more CIS grads and MSIT grads should think they're great too. I was going to go through my last little section here, which talked about the how to talk to your boss and situational leadership, but I want to be conscious of everyone's time. So why don't we pause here for questions? And if people want me to dig into that, I can. Otherwise, we can just ask some questions and
We'll
get
invite
out
you
of here.
back to talk about leadership another time.
Yeah, anytime. Happy to help.
What questions do you guys have for Chris about anything? And Chris, what questions do you have for them? Is it two-way street here?
I mean, I'm interested in, specifically for the freshmen, are you considering computer information systems as a major? Not to put you on the spot.
I'd say I wasn't when I first got here, but I have been, Brandenburg and the CIS Sandbox has been putting on a lot of these for a couple of weeks now, and I've gone through all of them. That there's a lot more than just developer when it comes to CIS. You don't think, but there's a lot more jobs out there than you would consider. But my question for you though is that, like, in your time at like Deloitte specifically, right? Even though it was 2 years, did that allow you to, did consulting, was it easy coming out of that? Should I say? Not, maybe not easy, but doable, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good question. I really appreciated my time at Deloitte. You as a consultant, you get to access and you get exposure to lots of leadership, different management styles, different companies, different technologies. You consume kind of different scenarios, different job scenarios very quickly. Certainly far more quickly than you would working outside of a consulting firm. It was easy for me to transition out of Deloitte because I think that same skill set, right? A lot of companies, they want to embody the same qualities as consulting companies, right? They want to move quickly. They want to impact change. They want to drive change. And a lot of that skill set carries over. I think that consulting though is not right for everyone. And I would really, I would advise everyone who's interested in consulting to go to their events, meet with the folks, meet with other grads, talk to them. It can be a very grueling lifestyle in terms of hours. I certainly worked my fair share of, almost always 50, 60-hour weeks. I had multiple 80-hour weeks. And that may have changed in the last year. I personally would not have traded that experience. I really liked it. I thought it exposed me to a lot of different scenarios that I wouldn't get otherwise. But for me personally, I also knew that I didn't want to be there forever, right? I didn't want that type of environment forever. And so, I probably easily could have stayed a few more years. However, I found Akamai and I fell in love with the technology. And that's really what pulled me away. A lot of the consulting, for what you learn in consulting in terms of business and teams and management and how to be, successful and drive results. Sometimes there is sometimes the consulting firms are not the fastest or early adopters of new technology. They have strategy practices that will certainly lead the charge. And so they're the ones talking about blockchain and AI and machine learning, and they're out front right now doing that work. But when it comes to the implementation jobs within those consulting companies, a lot of their money is made, hey, we're going to come up with a solution, and then we're going to do that same solution for the next 5 years, and then we'll come up with another solution. And so there's definitely a balance. You gain a huge amount of experience around, as I said, management and interacting with others and driving results and being successful. Like the politics side, it is a crash course in how to be successful in business. On the flip side, if you really love new technology, you need to be able to go in and say, "Ooh, I might be using the same thing, the same solution, the same tech on 12 different projects for the next 5 years." For me, it was an easy choice when I saw Akamai. I am more of a technologist at heart, and so I made the switch there. Does that answer the question? But it was an easy switch. I will say some people who are in consulting for a long time feel like they can't. This is like a very well documented thing. I know it with my starting class at Deloitte. After a long time, a lot of folks feel like the time, the effort, the hours they're putting in, they can't find that anywhere else. And I feel like there's probably a support group somewhere of people who are, getting ready to leave consulting, and other people who are just like catching them doing trust falls, because it is a completely, you can take that skill set and walk into any company and be successful with it.
Cool. We have time for about one more question, if there are any. Going once, going twice. Sold.
Cool. Well,
One of the best parts of doing this series of presentations by alumni is I get to catch up with people I haven't seen for a very long time. So I'm thrilled that we had a chance to say hi today and catch up with Chris, and also follow your career, and also get insights into what digital transformation is about in companies, and how we can begin now to think how to make it happen. Because when the folks who are in the room graduate 2 and 3 and 4 years from now, it'll be a different world than this today.
Yeah, for sure. But a lot of these concepts, learning how to communicate, learning how to talk about the technology, that isn't going away. And so whatever the exact, industry looks like, invest in those skills. Bentley's always done such a great job doing that. I have no doubt that you guys are all really well positioned. Take advantage of it.
Thanks, Chris.
Well, yeah, thank you all.
So